The town of Asheville, North Carolina, was nestled between rolling blue mountains, where crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine and damp earth. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where life moved a little slower. But for 10-year-old Sophie Carter, the world hadn't felt slow in a long time. Ever since her father, Daniel Carter, had passed away in a tragic car accident over a year ago, time had felt like a blur of sadness and unanswered questions. That Saturday morning, Sophie clutched a battered tin box close to her chest as she followed the worn dirt path toward the town's auction barn. Inside the tin were all her savings, birthday money, Christmas gifts, and every single dollar she'd managed to earn from chores. It wasn't much, but she wasn't here for just any auction. She was here for something specific, something important. Lauren Carter, her mother, walked beside her, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Sophie, I don't understand why you insisted on coming here. We don't need a dog." Sophie didn't answer. She had learned long ago that trying to explain things to adults never really worked the way she wanted. Instead, she just held on to the tin box a little tighter and kept walking. Inside the barn, the air was thick with the scent of hay and sawdust, mixed with the faint aroma of livestock. Rows of metal pens lined the walls, filled with animals waiting to be sold. Goats, horses, a few pigs, and, of course, dogs. Some of the dogs were excited, barking at passers-by, tails wagging. Others curled up in the corners of their enclosures, resigned to their fate. Then, Sophie saw him. A German shepherd lay motionless in the farthest pen, his ribs showing through his dull coat. He didn't wag his tail or perk his ears up like the others. His amber eyes held no excitement, only a weary acceptance of whatever was coming next. Sophie's heart clenched. "That one's been returned twice," a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. The auctioneer, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and a voice like gravel, stood beside her. Name's Shadow, was supposed to be a service dog but didn't make the cut. Turns out he's got health issues, seizures. No one wants a broken dog, kid. "I do," Sophie said without hesitation. Lauren stiffened beside her. "Sophie." The auctioneer scratched his chin. "Kid, I admire your spirit, but this ain't a pet adoption fair. That dog needs medical care, probably training. He's more trouble than he's worth." Sophie ignored him. She turned to face the auction block as the bidding started. Other dogs were sold off quickly, their prices climbing past anything she could afford. Then, Shadow's turn came. "We'll start at 100, the auctioneer announced. Silence filled the barn. No one moved. 75? He tried again. Still nothing. 50? Sophie took a deep breath and stepped forward. $50, she said, her voice steady. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some chuckled. Others shook their heads. The auctioneer looked hesitant. "That all you got, kid?" Sophie nodded and lifted the tin box, the coins inside rattling. The man sighed. Going once, going twice. He paused, almost as if waiting for someone to outbid her. But no one did. He let out a sharp breath and smacked the gavel down. "Sold to the little lady in the front." Sophie exhaled, her heart pounding. She did it. Shadow was hers. Lauren's hand clamped onto her shoulder. "Sophie, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking that he needs me," Sophie whispered, stepping closer to the pen. Shadow didn't move at first, but as she knelt down and reached out a small hand, his ears twitched slightly. It wasn't much, but it was something. Lauren rubbed her temples. "We can't afford a sick dog, Sophie. We don't have the money for vet bills for—" "I'll take care of him," Sophie interrupted. "I'll use Dad's old training notes. I'll make him better." Her mother's expression softened just slightly at the mention of Daniel. Even now, His absence left an emptiness in their home, an unspoken grief that neither of them fully addressed. He had been a service dog trainer, one of the best, and Sophie had spent countless hours watching him work. If anyone could help Shadow, it was her. Lauren let out a slow sigh. "We'll talk about this later." Sophie beamed and turned back to Shadow. "Come on, boy, let's go home." As they led Shadow out of the barn, Sophie felt a sense of triumph. But as she looked around, a chill ran down her spine. In the crowd, a man stood watching them. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, and his expression was unreadable. But his eyes were locked onto Shadow, and when Sophie met his gaze, a slow, knowing smile crossed his lips. She swallowed hard, gripping Shadow's leash tighter. Something told her that this wasn't just about saving a dog, it was just the beginning. Sophie lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling as the soft hum of crickets outside filled the quiet night. Shadow lay curled up beside her, his body still frail, but his breathing steady. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind. The auctioneer's warnings, the murmurs of disapproval from the crowd, and most of all, the way Shadow had looked at her, as if understanding something no one else did. Her fingers traced the old metal tin that had once belonged to her father, now empty of the savings she had spent to save Shadow. Daniel Carter had been more than just a father. He had been her hero, a man who understood animals in a way no one else did. Sophie remembered watching him work in their old training barn, teaching dogs how to guide, protect, and serve people with disabilities. He used to tell her that some dogs had a purpose greater than just being pets. Could Shadow have been one of them? The next morning, Sophie woke up to the sound of her mother talking on the phone in the kitchen. She tiptoed down the stairs, pausing at the doorway as she caught bits of the conversation. "Yes, Dr. Bennett, I understand. But what exactly does that mean?" Lauren's voice was firm, but there was a hint of concern. Why would a dog from a service training program end up at an auction in this condition? Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She stepped into the kitchen just as her mother sighed and hung up the phone. "Mom? What did Dr. Bennett say about Shadow?" Lauren hesitated for a moment before gesturing for Sophie to sit. He looked into the records for the auctioned animals. Shadow wasn't just any dog. He was part of an advanced training program for seizure-alert dogs. Sophie's eyes widened. "Like the ones Dad used to train?" Lauren nodded. "Exactly. But here's where it gets strange. His paperwork was incomplete, with sections blacked out. Dr. Bennett said he's never seen records like that before. And there's something else." Lauren opened the folder she had brought home from the auction and pulled out a set of papers. "Look here. Shadow's previous owners returned him not because of failed training, but because of medical issues." "Medical issues?" Sophie frowned, glancing down at the documents. "You mean his seizures?" "Not just that. Dr. Bennett believes Shadow was part of an experimental program before he ever entered service training." Lauren tapped a section in the report. "These notes suggest that he might have been given something, some kind of treatment. But there's no record of what it was or why." A chill ran down Sophie's spine. "Do you think that's why they got rid of him? Because something went wrong?" Lauren sighed, brushing a hand through her hair. "I don't know, sweetie, but what I do know is that Shadow isn't just an ordinary dog, and that makes me worry." Before Sophie could respond, a knock at the front door startled them both. Lauren shot her daughter a warning look before heading toward the door. Sophie followed closely behind, peering over her mother's shoulder as she opened it. Standing on the porch was their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, holding a basket of freshly baked muffins. But the expression on her face was serious. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," Mrs. Wilson said, stepping inside. but I think you both need to hear something." Lauren led her to the dining table, where they sat down. Mrs. Wilson set the basket down but made no move to offer them, instead clasping her hands together. "I heard about what happened at the auction," she began, "and I also heard that you took home that dog." Her gaze shifted to Shadow, who lay at Sophie's feet, ears twitching as if he were listening. "That might put you both in danger." Lauren stiffened. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Wilson glanced toward the window, as if expecting someone to be watching. "A few months back, some men came through town. They were looking for a dog, described just like yours. I overheard them talking at the general store, asking if anyone had seen a German shepherd with certain traits. They didn't say why, but their questions made folks uneasy. Then, just as suddenly as they arrived, they disappeared." Sophie felt her stomach twist. "Do you think they were looking for Shadow?" Mrs. Wilson sighed. "I can't say for sure. But if they were, it means they knew about him long before he ended up at that auction. And now that you have him, you need to be careful." The air in the room grew heavy. Lauren glanced at Sophie, then back at Mrs. Wilson. "If these people were looking for him, do you think they'll come back?" The old woman nodded grimly. "I wouldn't be surprised." A cold shiver ran down Sophie's spine. She looked down at Shadow, who met her gaze with those intelligent amber eyes. He had been through so much already. She had promised to protect him. She wouldn't let anything happen to him now. That night, as the house settled into silence, Sophie pulled her blankets tighter around her. Shadow lay beside her, his slow breathing the only sound in the darkness. Then, outside her window, headlights flashed briefly before disappearing into the night. A black car sat parked at the end of their street watching. The morning after the strange black car was spotted near their home, Sophie couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her gut. Something was wrong. Ever since she had brought Shadow home from the auction, the world around her seemed to have shifted, as if an invisible force was slowly closing in on them. Shadow, however, was different. The once weak and frightened German shepherd had started responding to Sophie in ways that surprised even her. At first, it was subtle. His alertness, the way he watched her every move, as if anticipating her next command. Then, something happened that made Sophie certain Shadow was not an ordinary dog. That morning, Sophie decided to test Shadow with some basic commands from her father's old training manual. She had found the notebook the night before, buried under some of her father's old belongings in the attic. It smelled like dust and faintly of the leather jacket he used to wear, and flipping through the pages made Sophie feel close to him again. She knelt down beside Shadow in the backyard. "Sit," she commanded. Shadow obeyed instantly, his posture perfect, his eyes locked onto hers. "Stay." Again, flawless execution. Sophie bit her lip, flipping through the pages of the notebook. These were easy commands, ones any trained dog might know. But what about the more advanced ones? She took a deep breath and tried something she had never heard anyone use outside of her father's private training sessions. "Brace." Shadow's ears twitched. He hesitated for half a second, then shifted his weight, planting himself firmly as if preparing to support a person's weight. Sophie's heart pounded. How did he know that command? That was a service dog term, something meant to help people with balance issues, or... She flipped to another page and read aloud. "Alert." Shadow's ears perked. He stepped forward, sniffing the air as if trying to sense something. His tail stiffened. Then, as if sensing something Sophie couldn't, he let out a short, sharp bark and nudged her leg. Sophie gasped. He had responded, not just as a well-trained pet, but as something else, something more. He had been trained for a purpose that someone clearly didn't want her to uncover. That night, Sophie couldn't sleep. Shadow lay beside her bed, his breathing steady, but her thoughts raced. The notebook confirmed what she suspected. Shadow wasn't just a failed service dog. He had been part of a highly specialized training program, one her father had been involved with before his death. But why had he been abandoned? And why were people now looking for him? A crash from downstairs jolted Sophie upright. Shadow's head shot up, ears on high alert. Then he growled, a deep, menacing sound Sophie had never heard from him before. Sophie's breath hitched. Someone was in the house. She reached for her phone, but before she could dial, the door to her room creaked open. "Sophie?" It was her mother, Lauren, standing in the doorway, her face pale and her voice a whisper. "Stay here." "No," Sophie whispered back. Shadow's growling. Lauren's gaze dropped to the dog, whose entire body was rigid with tension. He was staring past them, toward the staircase. A shadow moved downstairs. Someone was inside. Lauren grabbed Sophie's hand and backed away toward the bedroom. But before she could shut the door, Shadow lunged forward. His barking was explosive, echoing through the house as he charged toward the intruder. A loud thud, a curse. Then, hurried footsteps, and the front door slamming shut. Sophie and Lauren rushed to the top of the stairs, but the house was empty, except for the shattered glass near the front door. Someone had broken in, and they hadn't been looking for money or valuables. They had been looking for Shadow. The next morning, as the police finished their inspection, Sophie sat on the front porch, hugging Shadow close. His body was warm and solid against her, grounding her in a way that nothing else could. Mrs. Wilson, their elderly neighbor, arrived with a worried expression. "Are you two all right?" she asked Lauren, eyeing the broken window. Lauren sighed. "We're fine, just shaken up. The police think it was an attempted burglary." Mrs. Wilson glanced at Sophie and Shadow, then lowered her voice. "That wasn't just a random burglary, dear. It was about the dog." Sophie stiffened. "What do you mean?" The old woman hesitated, then nodded to herself as if making a decision. "Come inside, child. There's something you need to know." Inside Mrs. Wilson's small, cozy kitchen, Sophie listened intently as the old woman spoke. "Years ago, a group of men came to town looking for a specific type of dog," she began. "They weren't just looking for any dog. They needed one that could detect medical conditions before they happened. They said it was for military use, but I always suspected there was more to it." Lauren frowned. "Medical detection?" Mrs. Wilson nodded. "Your father was one of the best trainers in the field, Sophie. He worked with those men, but he didn't trust them. He stopped working with them right before his accident." Sophie felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying they might have been involved in his accident?" Mrs. Wilson hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know, dear, but I do know this. If Shadow was one of those dogs, they won't stop looking for him." Sophie swallowed hard, gripping Shadow's fur. "Then we have to find out why." That evening, as Sophie and her mother returned home, they felt a weight hanging over them. The house felt different now. No longer just a home, but a place that had been violated. Lauren locked the door behind them and sighed. "We should stay with someone else for a few nights," she said. "At least until we figure this out." Sophie nodded, but deep down, she knew running wouldn't solve anything. If someone wanted Shadow that badly, they wouldn't stop until they got him, and Sophie wasn't about to let that happen. She glanced down at the dog by her side. Shadow wasn't just any dog. He was special. And if the people after him thought they could scare her into giving him up, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The wind howled through the trees, as Sophie sat in the dimly lit kitchen, her fingers curled tightly around the edge of the wooden table. The words scrawled across the living room wall still burned in her mind. Return it, or face the consequences. The weight of those words pressed heavily on her chest. Whoever these people were, they wanted Shadow, and they weren't going to stop until they got him. Lauren paced back and forth, her expression a mix of worry and anger. "This has gone too far," she muttered. "We need to go to the police." Sophie shook her head. "They won't believe us, Mom. What are we going to say? A mysterious group is after our dog because he was part of some secret experiment. They'll think we're crazy." Noah, who had been leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, nodded. "She's right. We don't have enough proof yet. And if these people are connected to something bigger, they might have ways of making sure the authorities stay out of it." Lauren exhaled sharply and ran a hand through her hair. "So, what do we do?" Noah looked at Sophie. "We find out exactly who we're up against. But first, we get out of here. They know where you live, which means staying here isn't safe." Lauren hesitated before nodding. "I have a friend, Rebecca. She has a cabin in the woods about 20 miles from here. It's off the grid. We could go there." Noah grabbed his jacket. "Good. Pack light. We leave now." The drive was tense and silent. Shadow sat in the back seat beside Sophie, his ears perked and his body stiff, as if sensing the danger that loomed over them. The headlights cut through the darkness as they wound their way into the mountains. When they finally arrived at the cabin, it was just as Noah had hoped. Isolated, hidden by thick pines and far from prying eyes. They unloaded quickly, securing the doors and windows before settling in. Sophie sat on the old couch with Shadow curled at her feet. "We need to know why they want him so badly," she said. "There has to be something in his medical records." Lauren pulled out the folder Doctor Bennett had given them before they fled. She flipped through the pages, pausing at a section highlighted in red ink. "This is it," she murmured. "Shadow was injected with an experimental drug during his training." Noah leaned in. "What kind of drug?" Lauren read aloud. "A neurological enhancement serum designed to increase canine sensory perception. Initial tests showed promising results, but prolonged exposure led to unpredictable side effects." Sophie's breath hitched. "That's why he can sense seizures before they happen, isn't it? The drug made him more aware." Lauren nodded. "Yes, but there's more." She turned the page. The serum didn't work on most dogs. Out of the 50 they tested, Shadow was the only successful subject. Noah cursed under his breath. "That explains why they want him back so badly. He's their only success." Sophie swallowed hard. "So what do we do now?" Before anyone could answer, the sound of crunching gravel outside made them all freeze. Noah moved quickly, peeking through the blinds. A black SUV was parked just beyond the tree line, its headlights off. "They found us." Lauren's face paled. "How?" Noah grabbed his gun. "Doesn't matter. We need to go, now." Sophie grabbed Shadow's leash, her heart pounding. "We can't let them take him." Lauren nodded. "Back door, now." They slipped out the rear exit just as footsteps crunched on the porch. They ran through the woods, their breath visible in the cold night air. Sophie held tight to Shadow's leash, urging him to keep up. Behind them, voices barked orders, followed by the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. Noah stopped, pressing them against a tree. "They're armed." Sophie's heart hammered in her chest. "What do we do?" Noah pulled out his phone and typed quickly. "I just sent our location to someone I trust. We just need to hold out until they get here." A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. sweeping dangerously close to them. A voice called out, "We know you're here." Hand over the dog, and no one gets hurt. Shadow let out a low growl. Sophie whispered, "We're not giving him up." Noah nodded. "Then we fight." The night air was thick with tension as they braced for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that this was only the beginning of the battle for Shadow's freedom. Sophie's heart pounded as she gripped the map Noah had spread across the dashboard of his truck. The facility where Biogentech had taken Shadow was hidden deep in the outskirts of Asheville, tucked away behind dense forest and private roads that weren't marked on any public maps. According to the information Noah had uncovered through his military contacts, this wasn't just a lab, it was a full-fledged research compound, well-guarded and nearly impenetrable. Lauren, sitting beside her daughter, ran a worried hand through her hair. "This is insane," she muttered. "We can't just walk in there and demand they hand over Shadow." "We're not walking in," Noah corrected, his voice firm. "We're sneaking in." Sophie clenched her fists. "I don't care what it takes, I'm getting him back." Noah exhaled sharply, studying the fierce determination in Sophie's eyes. "All right, kid," he said. "Then here's the plan." Under the cover of darkness, Noah led the way through the thick trees bordering Biogentech's compound. He moved with practiced ease, his time in the military evident in every calculated step. Sophie, despite her nerves, followed closely, mirroring his movements as best she could. Lauren, though terrified, stayed right behind them, her protective instincts outweighing her fear. The compound was surrounded by a tall, electrified fence, but Noah had anticipated that. Using a set of wire cutters, he quickly created a small opening near the ground, just big enough for Sophie to squeeze through. Lauren hesitated for a split second before crawling through after her daughter. Beyond the fence, the facility loomed like a ghostly monolith, its sterile white walls reflecting the moonlight. Noah led them toward a side entrance, a maintenance door he'd identified as the least secure point. With a deft hand, he picked the lock and ushered them inside. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a cold glow over the pristine, white hallways. Sophie's hands trembled as she clutched the small flashlight Noah had given her, trying to steady her breathing. "We find Shadow, and we get out." "Fast," Noah whispered. Navigating the building felt like walking through a labyrinth. Every door they passed bore scientific labels: neurological testing, experimental trials, genetic modification. The deeper they went, the more sinister it became. Finally, they reached a corridor marked Canine Research Wing. Sophie's pulse quickened. "This is it," she whispered. Noah tried the first door. Locked. He moved to the next one. Also locked. Panic started to set in. Then a faint whimper echoed down the hall. Sophie's head snapped up. "Shadow," she breathed. They followed the sound until they reached a heavy metal door with a small window. Inside, Shadow lay motionless in a crate, hooked up to wires and monitors. His breathing was shallow, his body limp. "No," Sophie choked out, her fingers scrambling at the keypad lock on the door. "We have to get him out." Lauren grabbed her daughter's shoulders. "Sophie, wait, we need to do this right." Noah pulled out a small device and attached it to the keypad. "Give me a minute." Sophie pressed her hand against the glass, willing Shadow to move, to acknowledge her, but he remained still. The lock clicked open. Sophie burst through the door, rushing to Shadow's side. She reached into the crate, gently cupping his face. "Shadow, it's me. I'm here." The German shepherd's eyes fluttered open, and for the briefest moment, recognition flickered in them. Then, an alarm blared through the facility. "Damn it!" Noah cursed. "They know we're here. We have to move now." Lauren helped Sophie unhook the wires from Shadow as Noah scanned the room for an alternate escape route. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Guards were coming. Shadow, though weak, let out a low growl as Sophie gently lifted him from the crate. He was lighter than before, his once strong body now frail, but there was still fight left in him. Sophie wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly as Noah shoved open a secondary door leading into another corridor. "This way," he hissed. They sprinted through the facility, alarms wailing around them. Sophie struggled under Shadow's weight, but she refused to let go. Lauren took one of his front legs, helping her carry him as they ran. Bursting out onto the loading dock, they found themselves face to face with a squad of Biogentech security officers, guns raised. "Put the dog down," a man in a suit ordered, stepping forward. His sharp features and steely eyes sent a chill down Sophie's spine. "You don't understand what you're interfering with." Noah stepped protectively in front of Sophie and Lauren. "We understand perfectly," he growled. "You experimented on this dog. You used him. That ends now." The man smirked. "That dog is the key to medical advancements that could change the world. You really think a 10-year-old girl and an ex-soldier are going to stop that?" Before Noah could respond, headlights suddenly flooded the dock. A caravan of police cars screeched to a stop, sirens wailing. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. Leading them was Dr. Bennett, alongside a well-known investigative journalist who had been gathering evidence against Biogentech for months. "You're done, Doctor," Bennett declared. "This entire operation is illegal. You won't get away with this." The man in the suit stiffened, glancing at his men. Realizing they were outnumbered, he slowly raised his hands. One by one, the guards followed suit as the officers moved in to make arrests. Sophie collapsed to her knees, still holding Shadow. The weight of everything crashed over her at once, and for the first time since this nightmare had begun, she allowed herself to cry. The fallout from the Biogentech scandal was swift and brutal. The facility was shut down, its executives arrested, and its unethical experiments exposed to the world. Shadow, along with several other dogs, was placed under the care of trusted veterinarians, finally free from their captors. In the weeks that followed, Shadow slowly regained his strength. Though he would never fully recover from what had been done to him, he found solace in Sophie's unwavering love. Lauren, seeing the profound impact Shadow had on her daughter, made a decision. Together, they transformed their barn into a small training center, dedicated to rehabilitating rescued service dogs and pairing them with children in need. One afternoon, as Sophie played with Shadow in the fields, a package arrived in the mail. Inside was an old photograph of her father, standing beside a dog identical to Shadow. A single note was attached. "Some stories never truly end." Sophie smiled, holding the picture close. Shadow wasn't just any dog. He was part of something bigger, something her father had started long ago, and now she would continue it. Together, they had found their purpose. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.